Hi booktube, Aaron here. Hope you're doing okay. Today I'm going to do another random recent reads. So this is a fairly regular segment I'm going to try and do where I just talk about what I've been reading recently. Not on any particular timescale. I won't be doing it every week, but it's just to take a little bit of pressure off my monthly wrap-ups and hopefully give me a bit of an opportunity to speak in a little more depth about the books that I've been reading. And I've got 3 books today. I've finished them all in the last week or so, maybe a little more than that. And I'll start with the shortest and hopefully it'll be the easiest to talk about. We'll see how it goes. And it's Mandeville by Matthew Francis. So it's a poetry collection, but it's a kind of reworking of the travels of Sir John Mandeville. So this was a quite a popular book in the Middle Ages. I think people are kind of unsure as to whether John Mandeville actually existed, but it's a very fanciful travel narrative, a kind of pilgrimage narrative. It then goes a bit further. So he goes on to Jerusalem, I think via maybe Venice, and so he kind of goes overland through France and Italy, and then across the Mediterranean to I think to Egypt actually, and then goes up to Jerusalem and to the Dead Sea, and then goes further then into the Middle East and up to India and beyond. And the whole idea of circumnavigation in here is quite prominent, and he keeps saying, I think the kind of tagline of this collection is, for you must know that the world is round. So Francis is taking this rather curious and fun medieval book, and he's sort of purposed sections of it for different poems, and I think he's trying to get across the variety and the strangeness of this book as succinctly as he can. And it's really, really fun. It just brings that medieval world to life. I think one of my favourite things about reading medieval literature or reading history about the Middle Ages or something like this, which is just, sort of writing about the Middle Ages, a book like The Name of the Rose, or anything that kind of brings the medieval life and the medieval worldview, the cosmology and all of that. Anything that brings all of that to life, I just find so curious and so fun as well. And he definitely brings that across. Obviously, Sir John Mandeville didn't make it all the way around the world, and it's rather doubtful that he really saw many of the places that he's writing about. But it's still amazing and really fun. And the best bit in here for me was the longest poem in here, which was called what was it called? It's called of the Vale Perilous, which is a valley which is filled with demons, and very few people make it out without their souls being snatched. Only the purest of heart can get through. And there's an entertaining poem in here called Of Pepper. So every poem is of so and so, and it's just describing some people harvesting pepper. And I don't know how accurate this is, but he says that they put lemon juice on their skin when harvesting the pepper plants, because the snakes hate the smell of lemon juice, and then they won't get bitten by the snakes. And so just little fun details like that, which who knows if maybe it's just something that Mandeville made up, maybe it was something that Francis made up. Who knows? The only kind of gripe I had for this book was that I kept on asking myself, why is this a poetry collection? And I love poetry, and part of me thinks I'd like to see sort of more sort of weird things like this made into poetry collections, and to have strange subjects like this, that the subject for poems. And yeah, I think the reason I kept on asking myself, why is this a poetry collection? Why isn't it, you know, a short story collection, or a weird sort of summary of this old medieval book, or a new translation, or a coffee table book, or a graphic novel? Why is it a poetry collection? The reason I'm asking myself all these questions is I feel like the language, the actual poetry itself, just wasn't pulling its weight. I feel like the kind of aim of this was to be something like, I got a couple of examples, maybe something like Memorial by Alice Oswald. I think this is actually after Mandeville. It's when was this written? Yeah, this is 2012. I think this was like 2004 or something, maybe. Oh, okay, 2008. But you know, a few years before. But still, with Memorial, Alice Oswald describes this as an excavation of the Iliad, and she's taking all of the names of the people who die, all of the descriptions of their death, and crucially the similes that are used. And it's just that, it's not, obviously, you know, by the length of it, it's not the whole of the Iliad. And I think she has a theory that essentially many of the similes have roots in agricultural and very natural language, and so her excavation is trying to bring that out of the Iliad. And you know, the actual poetry itself, the actual language, really comes alive, and that's what carries you through. And it's really, really good. Whereas, you know, with Mandeville, it's the world that he's chosen to write about that keeps you interested. So it's slightly different, and I think that's why I was asking, why is this a poetry collection? Maria Stepanova does sort of similar stuff in her poetry as well. This is War of the Beasts and of the Animals, and I'm sure there's a poem in here that kind of does a similar thing with The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. She kind of distills it and uses it as a kind of frame for her poem. But yeah, I'll move on. But I will say that Mandeville is quite fun, and if you're into medieval literature, or just the medieval world in general, you might find it an interesting curiosity. Next up, we've got a novel, a nice sort of classic novel, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and this is the first thing I've read by Brontë. I love Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and so it very much felt like coming home. It was definitely familiar territory to be reading this, and yeah, just her writing, it was flawless for me. Really, really loved just the tone of this, and I think it has what you come to a Brontë book for. It has just this gloomy atmosphere to it. We've got Wildfell Hall, which is an old derelict house that's kind of secluded and on a kind of windy outcrop, and we've got I suppose a kind of forbidden love, and it's only after a little bit of time that you realise it's forbidden and maybe impossible. And then you know, we've got the subject of women who don't really fit into societal norms, and are doing things a little bit differently, and speaking up for themselves in eventually speaking up for themselves in the case of this book. And it's just really, really good. I can't remember where I was going with this now. Anyway, to summarise, it's the story told by Mr. Markham. He's a young farmer, I think a kind of gentleman farmer, that's the impression I get. So it's a fairly well-to-do family, and he seems to be quite educated, quite a nice guy, but the kind of burden of sort of the family has fallen on him, and so he's more or less running the family farm, I think. And he's on the edge of maybe courting, I think, the vicar's daughter, something like that. It's of a young girl in the village, and it's not official yet or anything like that, but everyone's gossiping about it. And then the titular tenant of Wildfell Hall turns out, a woman known as Mrs. Graham, and he becomes obsessed with her, and wants to get closer to her and wants to get to know her better. And then it seems like she's got a terrible secret in her past, and this secret might be the reason why they can never be together. And it's just really, really great. It's really intense. There's just an emotional intensity that is just really, really well controlled, and only in a couple of instances erupts into physical violence. So yeah, it's a really, really great book. The only kind of flaw I could find with it was, and it was after I'd finished it and I'd been thinking about it for a few days, was the form of the novel itself. It's a kind of epistolary novel. It's Mr. Markham writing to a friend and sort of just telling him about the last few years of his life. But he's writing quite a lot to his friend, and it includes diary entries from other characters. And by the end, you just think that, well, if this isn't just to write a novel, is it really a believable letter? Would he really be saying so much? Would he really be conveying so many of the conversations in the way he is, and things like that? So that's the only kind of unbelievable thing, at least to my mind, was just the whole framing of the narrative. But it's interesting to see how the different Brontë sisters deal with the Gothic and different elements of the Gothic novel. So like Wuthering Heights, you've got, I suppose it's almost like a tale of the Revenant or the ghost story kind of thing, or kind of anti-ghost story. I suppose there's a similar thing in Jane Eyre as well, although I was thinking that there's a kind of different element of the Gothic that I was thinking of in Jane Eyre. I can't remember what it was, that I had a different thing for each sister. The thing that that Anne is doing in here, actually I suppose Emily does it in Wuthering Heights as well, is the kind of story within a story, where I suppose in a traditional novel it won't be in any way connected. It really won't be connected to the novel itself, whereas actually in both Wuthering Heights and in Tenant of Wildfell Hall, it's giving you invaluable information about the past of these characters. So it's like an interesting development of the Gothic tradition, I suppose. She also, Anne deals with, I suppose, the Byronic hero quite differently as well. Heathcliff and Rochester are both kind of typical Byronic heroes. They're both incredibly flawed, but a lot of people tend to have a bit of a soft spot for them. And there's a character in here, I suppose the villain of the novel, who is a kind of Byronic villain. He's our Byronic character, but you really don't have any sympathy for him for him at all. And eventually you don't really see him as evil per se, but kind of just really pathetic and really small and a bit, well, I would say useless, but he's got influence and he's using it for really bad reasons. And so yeah, it's a really unromanticized view of the Byronic hero, and I thought that was really quite interesting. And he's not a hero at all in this. So yeah, a great book. I need to read or reread Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre now, just to see where Anne fits for me. But yeah, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I've got a relationship with this book that I didn't have with Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre. So anyway, food for thought. And then the third book I want to talk about, hopefully quite quickly, is one I read on my trusty Kindle, and it was Istanbul, A Tale of Three Cities by Bettany Hughes, and it's a history book about more or less the whole history of Istanbul. And I finished this recently. I wasn't really expecting to finish it so soon. Since I was reading it on my Kindle, I had the kind of percentage of the way through, and because it's a Kindle, but I didn't get it through the Amazon ecosystem, it means it didn't see it as a book but as a document, meaning I didn't really have page numbers. I had those weird location numbers, and so it was really hard to work out how far through the actual book I was, since with it being a history book, you're going to expect there are going to be notes and references and things in the back, and it turned out that just over 30% of this book is extra material, is the bibliography and the notes, and there's an appendix. I've never been so excited to read an appendix in in my life, because by the end I was absolutely just gagging for more. It was just her writing was amazing. The way she's able to mirror the past and the present of this city was just really, really good. And it's hard to really summarize it. I'm not exactly new to reading history, but I've been trying to read more of it this year, and I haven't worked out a way to talk about it that coherently. If what you've seen so far in this video has been in any way coherent. But I suppose the one thing I will say is that going into this, my main interest for Istanbul was Constantinople, was the Byzantine Empire. And I suppose I was slightly curious about the Ottomans as well. And that was actually really fascinating. In my wrap-up video, I think I went in a little bit into her approach to writing about the Ottomans. And by the end, by the time I finished this book, what it made me want to do is just to visit this city and experience it, and just to walk around and to be there. So yeah, Istanbul is now a place that I'd really like to visit. And yeah, I just well, at least fell in love with what Bettany Hughes had to say about the place, the First World War. So yeah, a really, really good book. Maybe so good that I might want to get a physical version eventually. I'm not in a rush to get it. I've got it on my Kindle for the time being. But it was a really, really fun book, and if you're at all interested in the in Istanbul, in the Ottoman Empire, in the Byzantine Empire, then yeah, definitely check it out. Quickly before I go, just the books that I've been reading this weekend and sort of since reading those things. I've been reading Proust, and I've been trying to make some headway in Proust this weekend. I'm really hoping to finish Remembrance of Things Past by the end of the summer, and I've got about 80 pages, maybe a little bit less, to go in this one, and then I'll have like another 1,000 or so pages to go. But I'm getting there, and I'm enjoying it. Whenever I pick up Proust after a little while, I sometimes go about a week or two without having picked up Proust. There's just this instant feeling of, where were we? And I just get sucked straight back into this world. It's just really great. It's just like, as I keep saying, like talking to a friend. And sometimes you go a little while without seeing them, but you're still happy to spend time with them, even you know, there's been some time since you last saw them. So yeah, it's been really good. I've also been reading some poems by Dante in this, in Rime, or Rime, I think. And it's mainly sonnets, and it's quite interesting. Again, like the Mandeville stuff, it's just for me an exploration of just the medieval sort of mind, I suppose. But again, Dante's a great poet as well, and there's been some sort of great lines and some great conceits in there. And then I've also been reading Crime and Punishment, the Michael Katz translation, and I've been enjoying Crime and Punishment. I'll let you know what I think about it when I've finished it, which might be in a little while. But I'm enjoying it. I'm not sure if I prefer it to the Brothers Karamazov or not. I'm not too sure. But yeah, it's been good. But I'll leave it there. I don't want to ramble on too much. Don't want another 40-minute long video. So that's what I've been reading recently. And yeah, I look forward to seeing, what happens on BookTube this week. So for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care.